My first question for you here, I noticed on your Twitter avatar that you still have the photo from the WEC, and obviously that was a very cherished part of your career. Looking back on your WEC tenure, what was sort of your most memorable moment competing for them?
Getting my first win in the WEC on, at the time I felt was one of the biggest stages in mixed martial arts. Proving to myself that I belong there with the best guys. I beat a veteran who had wins in my organization, and I felt like I belonged there. And I finally made it happen.
That you did, and you've moved on to bigger and better things. And let's talk about this fight here against Michael Johnson. Was this a matchup that you wanted, or was this something the UFC presented to you?
I was definitely looking at the top of the pack. I want that belt, but this is a good opportunity to headline the card, and it's a fun stylistic matchup.
That it is. And, you're coming off the win over Bobby Green at UFC 199. Were you surprised at all that you're fighting an opponent that doesn't have a winning streak, just like Green? Green was coming off a loss as well, too. Or do you sort of not worry about that stuff and just more so look at the stylistic matchup?
Yeah, I don't worry about that stuff as much. He's lost his last two fights, but I honestly feel like he got robbed of a decision against Beneil Dariush. I thought he won that fight. And then he went up there and had a fun fight with Nate Diaz. It was fun to watch. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun fight.
That it is. And I know in another interview with Flow Combat, actually, you mentioned that, even though there is kind of a rivalry between American Top Team and the Blackzilians, that doesn't really matter to you in this fight. But there has been some trash talk between the two of you on social media. Is that something that, kind of pumps you up more for a fight like this, or does that stuff not really matter to you?
It definitely pumps me up. It's exciting when a guy says something and here in 5 days I get to smack him in his mouth. That's always fun.
Definitely. Do you feel like you've won the battle so far on social media? Because you burned him a couple times on there, man.
Yeah, I'm not even trying. He's just setting himself up for the shots. So that'll happen in the fight as well.
And let's talk about the fight. How do you feel like you match up against Michael Johnson?
I feel like I'm better than him everywhere. I feel like, he's beat some good guys. He's beat two of the top-ranked guys in the division currently. And he's lost to some guys you've never heard of. So we'll see who shows up in Fight Night. But overall, I think he has a strong will. He goes out there to win for sure. And he sticks to the game plan and listens to his corner. But other than that, he's not great anywhere. He's not a great boxer or wrestler. I feel like I beat him everywhere the fight goes, and I'm excited to show that.
He hasn't fought since December 2015, and, he was injured, and he was supposed to fight, I believe it was a couple months after that, but he had the injury. Do you feel like his lack of activity is going to hurt him in this fight? You've been a lot more active than he has.
Yeah, but he's a guy with a good bit of experience and knows how to train and prepare for fights, so it might not hurt him at all. I know he was out because he had shoulder surgery, so he might be feeling better than he was in those last couple fights. We'll see. I don't think so much about it. I just prepare myself now. I'm a much more mature fighter than I used to be. I used to really care about what the guy was doing and what he said and what he was talking about, when it came to the fight. But I don't really give a shit anymore, man. I just do what I got to do, and I know I'm one of the best guys in the world, and I finally believe it.
Who are some of your main training partners that you've been working with ahead of this matchup against Michael Johnson?
This camp, I worked mostly with George Masvidal, Will Brooks, Santiago Ponzinibbio, and Mike Brown. My usual Colby Covington a lot. My usual guys, I help them and they help me. We have inside of the gym. There's so many great guys, and we have a good group that we like to work with, and those are the guys.
Now, you moved up to 155 pounds at the start of last year, and it's worked out well for you, winning 4 straight. Have you had to bulk up at all, being in the new weight class, or have you kind of kept things similar to when you were at featherweight?
I kept things similar to when I was at featherweight, but now I can just eat. I can eat more. So my body naturally grew and put on muscle how I've been wanting to do the last few years, but without me holding it back.
Do you feel like you were kind of the trailblazer to do that? Because we've seen a lot of guys ever since you moved up do the same thing. We've seen guys, move weight classes up, and I think you were kind of the guy that showed, hey, look, if I move up a weight class, I'm a lot more comfortable here. I'm not having to drain all that weight. Do you kind of feel that way at all?
No, it's cool if I did, start a trend, but I figure people are just tired of cutting so much damn weight, and they just say, I'm just going to go in there and fight closer to my natural weight and see what happens, and they feel great and have great turnouts. So, I knew it was coming. Even when I was winning fights at 45, I knew I couldn't do it much longer. And we just decided, me and my coach sat down and we decided to make the move. It was time. I was 25 when I did it, so I was only going to keep getting stronger and bigger over the years. The older you get, the tougher it gets.
It definitely does. Do you have to be pretty strict on your diet still, being at 55? You say you're eating more, but you having to eat, just as clean?
Oh yeah, I do. I do eat just as clean. But I eat a lot more, and my body appreciates it for sure. I actually find it easier to stay lower in weight. When I was 45, I used to get up bigger. I used to be heavier than I am at 55. And I think that was because my metabolism was thrown off and a lot of things. But I stay in great shape year round now because I'm not bouncing up so high between weigh-ins and normal life. I used to get up to in the 80s easily, 182, 185 when I was at 45. And now I'm not even touching the 80s even weeks after the fight.
And you're headlining your first fight since 2012. You were supposed to headline the card with Joseph Duffy, but they, that fight obviously got rescheduled to the Fight Pass portion of the card. Does that sort of pump you up more for these fights? Like, do you like being in the spotlight like this? The main attraction.
I like being the main attraction for sure. I don't like doing all the interviews and all that comes along with it, but I definitely like to see myself on the posters and fight 5 rounds. That's exciting.
Fair enough. I like the honesty. Prediction Saturday night. How do you see this fight ending?
I'm gonna stay in Michael Johnson's face, and I'm gonna break him. He's a front runner, and I'm in it every time I get in the cage. I'm in it from bell to bell, and you're gonna see the guy crumble. I'm gonna finish him, soften him up in the first couple rounds, and I'll finish him in the third or fourth or earlier.
I know you're not looking past Michael Johnson, but is there anyone you want after this, as far as looking at the rest of the division, or you'll just kind of see how it plays out?
I'll see how it plays out. Maybe I'll push for another top fight before the year's end, or maybe I'll start back up in January. We'll see. But right now, I'm just focused on Michael Johnson.
And where do you think a win over Johnson puts you in the division? Because, again, that would be 5 in a row. That's a pretty good winning streak for a very crowded division like lightweight.
Yeah, I think it depends on how the fight goes, how I perform. If I go out there and finish a guy like I did my last fight, that's just going to continue to push the rise up the ranks and give me bigger fights. And that's what I'm expecting to do.
One more question for you. All the talk right now is about CM Punk and his performance on Saturday night. What are your thoughts on him, competing in the UFC, making $500,000? What are your thoughts on him, competing in the UFC?
Man, it's crazy to see, honestly, for me. I expected him to be at least a little bit better than that, to have a chance or have some kind of skills, or just the way he marched across the cage with no respect for distance, or his opponent walked right into him almost. It was just, I thought he was a more educated fighter than that. But other than that, I'm glad to see guys making $500,000 paydays. I'd like to see it more on every card that way. I know the payouts are going up and the sport's growing and guys are making more money, and that's where I want to be. So hopefully every card we see guys making more and more.
Well, certainly looking forward to your fight this Saturday. Dustin, appreciate the time, man. Where can people get a hold of you on social media? And if you got any thank yous or shout-outs, let the audience know.
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Dustin Poirier on all across the board. And I want to shout out to Head Rush brand. They've been with me, man, since my first fight in the UFC, and they've rode this wave with me and been a great company. So I just want to thank those guys.